Week we had a talk by Efrat Kaznik talking about the importance of intellectual property for small businesses. So today I'm going to be talking about two posts. One kind of on the importance of intellectual property for small businesses, and two, intellectual property is a strategic business asset. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the importance of intellectual property for small businesses. So StopFace is a U.S. government website dedicated to IP protection, and they gave five kind of questions to talk about IP protection for small businesses. So the first question that they ask is, why is intellectual property important? So intellectual property protection is extremely critical to fostering innovation. If the ideas that people have aren't protected, businesses and individuals that wanted to put out their ideas to the world would not be able to reap the benefits of their own ideas, their own creativity, their own inventions, and would focus less on research and development and more on manufacturing and just kind of creating what's already out there and not really kind of pushing the boundaries and saying, I have the ability to make something great as long as I get the full realistic benefits from it. Similarly, people like artists would not be able to be fully compensated for their own creations, and cultural vitality would be able to suffer as a result. The second question that StopFace talks about is, why should I protect my intellectual property? So piracy, counterfeiting, and the theft of intellectual property assets poses a serious threat to all American businesses. Exporters face unfair competition abroad. Non-exporters face counterfeit importers at home, and all businesses face legal, health, and safety risks from the threat of counterfeit goods entering their supply chains. So it's clear that intellectual property is extremely important because it stops kind of the unknown from entering the known perspective. The reason why people kind of take intellectual property, as I said in previous videos, it's a loan between you and the U.S. government. The U.S. government gives you protection for a certain amount of time. In return, you have to disclose your entire invention. So instead of having pirates, counterfeiters, and people that are willing to steal the intellectual property assets, the actual American business or the person that is inventing it says, "This is what I have. I put all of my cards out on the table. There's no way for somebody to kind of take unfair competition or to take legal, health, and safety risks from things that aren't in the boundaries of my intellectual property in for future products if it's something that goes into something that's larger. For example, if it's a cell phone patent, that cell phones have thousands of patents, it must be clearly delineated what's actually going into my phone, so I'm not getting unhealthy doses of microwave radiation or radiation into my head while it's right next to my ear. That comes from intellectual property protection. The third question they talk about is, why should I protect my intellectual property abroad? And the answer here is, most U.S. small businesses are not aware that their U.S. patent or trademark doesn't protect them in other countries. If you're an exporter, you think you might want to export in the future as a small business, you need to seriously consider securing protection for your intellectual property in the markets that you want to export to. It's a really good idea to get the appropriate forms of IP protection in those countries before you start kind of creating business or shipping to that country. And what's really common is U.S. companies have found foreign manufacturers copying their products, packaging, and business plans, even though they've never done business there, and that's because they don't have the IP protection in that country. So the company in that country, for example, in the European Union, if you don't file a patent, even though you have a U.S. patent, if you don't file it in the European Union, a European company can say, hey, it's not patentable here, it's not patented here. I can take that product, make it my own, and sell it with no legal recourse from you as a U.S. business. And so they can really easily kind of fake your product as their own and profit from it. So it's pretty important that you protect your intellectual property abroad. The fourth question is, how serious is a problem of counterfeiting and piracy? Basically, what's the economic impact? And so the FBI, Interpol, and the World Trade Organization estimate 7 to 8% of all trade is counterfeit, pirated, or intellectual property stolen goods. This totals to approximately $500 billion a year in lost sales, and U.S. companies alone lose between $200 and $250 billion in intellectual property losses every year. It is a huge problem. But while IP theft poses a risk to a lot of industry sectors, the consumer goods, manufacturing, technology, software, and biotechnology and pharmaceutical fields are the most commonly affected by intellectual property theft counterfeiting, and piracy. And finally, the last question, and really the most important one, is why should small businesses protect their intellectual property rights? And so, while it's difficult to determine the exact scope and extent of intellectual property, basically every indicator that has come through between, the World Trade Organization, Interpol, and the FBI has stated that copyright, piracy, trademark counterfeiting, and patent infringement have become extremely significant problems to the business community in general, especially in the small business sector, and especially in the last 5 to 10 years. Small businesses that export, especially, are extremely vulnerable to IP risks, and as such need to be uh, extremely observant of their own intellectual property hazards. But one of the biggest things is because small businesses really lack the knowledge and expertise of intellectual property, they really don't know how to protect themselves against theft of their own property and products. In fact, the USPTO has found that only 15% of small businesses that conduct business overseas know that they need to file for IP protection abroad. So it's clear that small businesses simply don't have the experience and need to be kind of shown that for a small business, intellectual property, both at home and abroad, is extremely important to making sure that they stay strong and stable in the future. So intellectual property is extremely important to small businesses in general for those 5 reasons.